Okay, binary choice rules. These can be true and false. They can also be extended into not just binary or two choices, but also 3, 4, 5. The only difference being that between that and multiple choices, that the options stay the same. So say that you are trying to have students determine different types of government, and you have like democracies, monarchies, and oligarchies, and every single one is one of those three. Well, that would be an alternative response. You could throw in a dictatorship and have there be 4 responses. Yeah, you could throw in anarchy or a governmentless situation, and that would be a 5th one. And so the only thing would be that those options would stay the same throughout all the different questions. Rule number 1, targeting misconceptions. Right? It's not the greatest rule, actually. It's just the idea that if you're going to use true and false, the big problem with true and false is that you have this 50% guessing factor, and that's not great. So you want to make sure that you're going to slant things kind of in the favor of, if you don't know, you're probably going to get it wrong, because the common knowledge says the wrong answer. There's limited material in reality for this, because there's not always misconceptions. But if there are, you want to make sure that you target those things. In your philosophy of education class, for example, you probably talked about the difference between desegregation and integration. And, the common thought is that those two things are exactly the same, that desegregating the school is the same thing as integrating it. But it's not. They're actually different. And so you would want to focus on that as the subject of a true and false type question. Again, this ain't the greatest rule. It really deals with the reliability issue, stability reliability, to be precise. And of course, that always turns into a validity issue. Limiting the negatives and no double negatives. This is just another instance of the original rule of keeping the wording simple. It's a general item rule. Anytime you add in double negatives, triple negatives, right, you are complicating the syntax. There are more and more rules, and it's easier for the person to get confused. So you are measuring really not necessarily their knowledge, but their ability to work through negations and logical thought. It's a bias issue, and that ultimately, of course, turns into a validity issue as well. One concept per statement. The problem here is that when you have more than one concept per statement in a true and false, and it only matters for true and false, does not matter for anything else. And if you write down that this is a problem with another format, I will have to deduct a point, because it's not. It's only with true and false. The problem is, say that you have part A of a sentence and part B of a sentence. Now, the only way that whole sentence can be true is if both A and B are true. That leaves A being true and B being false as one false option, A being false and B being true as another false option, and both A and B being false as a third false option. So for one problem, if I don't know the answer and there's multiple ideas in a true and false statement, I should just guess false, because I have much better odds of it being false. The other problem is that suppose that one is false and one is true. Well, I may think, let's suppose that A is true and B is false in reality. I may think that A is actually false and B is actually true, and have this total misconception, but I'll still get the answer right, and you'll never know. So that's the bigger problem. It only matters in true and false. It is a validity issue, pure and simple, that I am not measuring what I want to measure or what I think I'm measuring. It's kind of a construct validity issue, actually. When we go with equal number of true and false, right, it's just really another clue. And so this goes with general rule number 3, don't put clues in there. And oops, as we talked about before, looking at clues, there we go, is a validity issue. Same thing goes for don't let the item length give the answer away. And again, this is just if there is a pattern and it gives a clue. My true and false statements will, of course, be different lengths. But if I notice that all the short ones are true and all the really long ones are false, well, that's going to start giving it away, and I'm going to be able to guess a little bit better than I would just by chance. And so I'm adding extra clues in there. It's messing up what I'm trying to measure. It's a validity issue. So that's it for the binary choice rules. Next up is multiple choice.